Hey everyone! It's another edition of the Bit Silly Book Club, the second edition, by my recollection. I'm Felicia, and that's Cluster.
I talk after I'm introduced.
Yeah. And today we're covering the latest issue of the IDW published Sonic the Hedgehog comic series, which we've been following for quite a while.
Yeah. Gosh, it's been a little over 2 years now since I started on the comic, and the comic had been going on for about 2 years at that point.
Yeah,
uh,
and I believe after we'd read quite a bit of IW Sonic was when we started our read through of like the previous series of comics for Sonic by was published by Archie.
yeah, all the way back in the 90s through the 2000s, and then even a little bit into the 2010s.
Yep.
Because if you're here just looking for a review of a comic, somehow, you may not be aware that actually Sonic has a very long history in American comics.
Yeah.
So this book is definitely like holding up a pretty long time sort of legacy for Sonic, which is quite interesting.
And certainly a legacy that very easily could not have happened if a few key people did not bust their fucking asses making these comics like they have.
Yeah, I mean, comics really rely on passionate, undervalued people to succeed. What a great industry.
Yeah.
For anyone who is thinking about getting into the series, you might be wondering, is this a good jumping on point? No.
No.
No. This particular book involves multiple events that were set up in a few recent issues
Yes.
and a current ongoing miniseries, but it also features several comics original characters that were set up in previous stories. For my money, if you want to get started on the comic, I believe Volume 9 of the collected edition came out very recently.
It should
Is
be
that
Chow
correct?
Races and Badnik Bases, at any rate.
Yeah, you want the volume that is titled Chow Races and Batting Bases. I think it's number 9, and I think it came out just like last month or something, or just rather recently.
Really recently.
Um, that one was billed by the writer who was a new writer coming onto the series, sort of. He'd written on some of the annuals, but is also the writer today, Evan Stanley. And C had presented it certainly as like a good coming on point for new readers. It had
Yeah.
just gotten off a very long story arc. So starting there, I think is good. It introduces some neat new characters that are currently relevant to the comic, as we will talk about in this review, as one of them comes up here.
Yeah. Very, very surprising that. And this is going to be a spoilery review, as is stated in the title. So,
Yes, we will be sort of going over what happens, but hey, if it sounds good and fun and interesting, and you haven't started reading the comic and you want to get into it, I would
please.
recommend starting at Tower Race and Batting Bases. I will warn you, I don't think that Zeddy Hunt, which was a 4-issue arc that happened last year, through the middle of last year, I don't think that was very good.
Yeah.
I'd skip it, personally.
It
But
honestly
you do
doesn't
you.
add much.
Do check out the test run arc that follows
Hey,
Tower Race and Batting Bases.
Ryan Rudnick in chat, thank you for stopping by. And yeah, this issue
Yeah.
was so good.
Yeah, we are going to get into talking about the issue. I just wanted to make sure that anybody who's coming in who
Yeah.
is not as familiar with this comic sort of can get a handle on like what we would recommend for starters.
Yeah, yeah. So, yeah, and if your thing is single issues and just going through those, because they do discount those after they've been out for a while.
Yes.
Tower Races and Batting Bases does start at issue 33, and if you really want to go further back, I really cannot recommend enough even. The Tangle and Whisper miniseries, written by Ian Flynn and illustrated by Evan Stanley.
Yes.
I think it's easily one of the greatest achievements that Ian Flynn has put out in his 15 years of writing on the comics, and definitely something to be proud of. And it certainly got me very invested in the characters of Tangle Whisper, and that's kind of just getting into the broader world of this comic series and what it's kind of
Yeah.
built in the past 4 years.
And I believe that the collected Tangle and Whisper also comes with the first annual, which is it's sort of an anthology style book with multiple writers and artists all doing rather small stories. Um, and I think the annuals overall have been pretty good. I have mixed opinions on the individual stories.
Yeah.
They have highs and lows, but like I think the annuals are worth reading. You'll probably find at
Yeah.
least one story in each annual that you like. I think.
I think so too. They're definitely diverse.
I found two in each that I liked. So
Yeah. So good for us.
yeah,
But yeah,
I
I
can be a
think
fan of anthology sometimes.
yeah, I think that's enough preamble from us. I think we should just get started with this book we're covering today, which is of
Yeah.
course written by Evan Stanley, and due to the formatting of our little Bitsley book club thing, I build Aaron Hamstrom as the artist, which the comic does too. But Matt
I assume Froze.
Matthew did the inks and the
I assume
colors.
if Matt Froze ever becomes a supervillain, he will be ice themed.
Yeah, and lettering by Sean Lee and colors by Reggie Graham, who of Tower Races and Bad Dick Mace's fame. He did a really great job coloring that book, and he did an amazing job similarly doing this book.
Yeah,
He's
Reggie Graham has put out, I think, just some of the best overall coloring that the book has seen. There was I remember some stuff he did in Test Run that I felt like
he
I was mixed on the
experimented.
results. He did some experimenting there, but like if you look at the first issue of Test Run, you know that coloring might not side with you. It didn't work for me, but it was an experiment.
Yeah, and I definitely appreciate experimentation and going out on a limb on a different thing, even if it doesn't turn out great.
Yeah, it's good to try new things.
And yeah, so it's always a treat to see Reggie Graham's coloring, and they did work together, Aaron Hammerstrom and Reggie Graham, I believe, on the 30th anniversary special, which looked gorgeous. While
I only vaguely remember that book. I'll be honest, it was not my jam.
neither mine. But this comic book, I just wanted to
Yeah,
clear up just the Aaron Hammerstrom thing because you know there was an inker here. But
yes,
yeah, we've
Matt Bro.
gone over everyone whose hard work led to this comic book. Then we have the cover here.
Yes.
And we're going to be talking about cover A, I think, because that's
Yeah, it's the one on screen because of course this is a modern comic book, meaning that there's multiple covers,
yeah,
which is definitely a business decision kind of thing, and it's not something I care for. It's a money making thing.
Ryan and chat just yeah, the art is
Um,
very 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 impressive.
yeah.
Um,
There are three different covers for this.
yes,
There's this main A cover is
by Jonathan Gray with colors by Reggie Graham,
so you have this
and
information. Thank you.
yeah, and yeah, it I don't think it quite represents what the comic is like.
So I'll say two things about this cover.
Yeah,
Number one is that if you like Jonathan Gray's covers usually, you probably like this one.
yeah,
If you don't, you probably don't because this is very much the kind of cover he does where it's packed with a lot of detail. It has a lot of jokes and like references to things.
yeah,
And it's very his art tends to be very cartoony, very like sort of Looney Tunes is how I tend to think of it.
yeah. And I believe Fun fact, with the exception of co-writing with Ilya Baker, for the past several years, the Chaotix have been pretty exclusively written by Ian Flynn in the main series of books. There's been
I believe there was.
there's
You're
been some
saying?
annuals,
Yeah,
um,
they appeared in one of the annual stories into the 2020 annual.
which is a bit of a different thing than having a whole issue dedicated to it, as opposed to just kind of being one
Yeah,
part of an anthology.
the
And
2020 annual was also like it was very much building on Ian's work in almost every case, so it was,
This is all just to say that Jonathan Gray has been working on Sonic comics for a very long time, and he was in fact there the last time the Chaotix were written by someone other than Ian Flynn. That was Carl Bollers, and it was Return to Angel Island. Of course, they
yeah,
were
which
more
he did
filled
the
out.
interiors on.
Yeah, yeah, and yeah, now here he is doing cover A for the next time that happened.
Yeah,
Um,
I think of all the more recurrent artists, I think Jonathan Gray like goes back the furthest
yeah,
because he predates Ian Flynn's debut onto the Sonic comic scene, and while
hmm
they do sometimes bring back artists like I think Spaziante did a cover for the 30th anniversary special.
yeah. So he did return for that,
Um,
but he's not like
Spaziante doesn't come back off. They don't get called back much, but
yeah,
like John Gray often makes covers, and he even did some interiors for a few different things in the annuals, I believe.
yeah. And he's definitely made amazing strides as an artist. Like since he just started off really, really early, really young on the book at a
Yeah,
very rough time in the comic book, and I think the results of that growth show in this. Oh yeah, Ryan Rudnick and Jack. Spaziante definitely needs to come back much more.
hmm
I recall reading that he, at least back in the day, he would require 4 to 6 months lead-in time before he'd do a cover or do a comic maybe
yeah. Like those
interiors,
are comic interiors. I
and
mean,
and
really
uh,
frustrating.
and he refused to be rushed. So and I don't know what happens behind closed doors here in IW Sonic. It just feels like it's kind of a interesting production. I'm gonna say at
Yeah, the
times.
comic has been a, a fit. Like I think 2021 all throughout was the most, and I think 2020. Like I mean, the pandemic was definitely the thing that did it, but like there were a number of delays and things that kept hitting the comic, so comics would get pushed back and pushed back and pushed back.
Yeah,
And there were also a number of times in various issues where like the art clearly fell below the general standard of the book, um,
mm.
and that does still occasionally happen. And it's this book, for the record, looks gorgeous. we'll
Just
get
looks.
we'll get to the interiors.
Yeah,
Um, so if you want really good art in a comic, this has it. Uh,
yeah. Um, yeah. All,
uh,
all that to say, I'm not a fan of this cover A. I feel like the cover B and the retail incentive both do a much better job of just.
yeah, so this cover doesn't really align well with the tone of the comic.
Which is
Um,
not what you want at the best of times in with your cover A when you have like three covers. You want to pick one that's like
yeah.
gonna be like the comic inside.
Um, for my money, I think the best cover is Natalie Fordrain's art, which is very lovely. Feel free to look up the covers.
Yeah,
Uh, it's it's a very like silhouettes for the chaotics in front of a fairly simple background, and
yeah.
it's just very stylish, very simple.
And yeah, Natalie Fordrain's made kind of a name for herself in just making very like stylized and just appealing artwork, both for the retail incentive covers as well as on the song social media team.
Yeah, and the particular cover, the which you're not seeing, even though
Yeah,
it's our favorite cover, but it's not the A cover,
it's
so
not the A cover. Yeah,
um, it's not in her usual style. It's a different sort of a look, and it's a very good look. I very much like it. I like that she went for this,
yeah. It turned
sort
out
of.
well.
It's just very nice. I don't know how to. I don't have art words. I don't. I've not studied art, but I like all the things with the colors.
She went out on a limb, and it turned out great. And more power
Yeah.
to her.
Mm-hmm.
And there's cover B by Abby Bulmer with colors by Joanna Lafuente. I'm gonna say
La Fuente, maybe?
Lafuente, perhaps.
Because there's a U in there.
Yeah. Which is also good, and I would have accepted this as cover A, but yeah.
Yeah, it's a little vector in front of like a cork board with the red lines, like you'd see
Yeah.
on a cop sew or a detective sew,
Hmm.
because he is a detective. Uh, and Sarmi's being Sarmi, being a kid eating snack,
Yeah.
and SBO's looking bored, and it's nice.
Yeah. Reminds me of how the ending to Trial by Fire looked with Charmy in his paper hat, his newspaper hat,
That
which you
was
can
a
see in the
that was
story
like a
so
light.
far page.
Yes, so I guess we should just get into the comic proper. And so for this series, something they tend to do is open, well, something they do as part of their format is they open
Yeah.
with the story so far, which
Yeah.
is generally more helpful when it is part 2 or 3 or 4 of a contiguous story, rather than this, which is a standalone issue sort of in the middle of a number of plot events that are building towards issue 50, which is arbitrarily a big deal because it's a multiple of 25.
Just the most information you get is, oh, meet you. I saw who did it. It was a lady with big spikes and a boy my size. The lady made lightning with her hands. That's what started the fire. Exclamation point. Just windows pop, lights popping, and traffic jam. And then this was no accident with the chaotics. It doesn't really explain anything.
So, to be clear, the story so far page covers, I think this is 2 panels from Trial by Fire 1,
Mm-hmm.
or maybe 1 panel from 1 and 2 from 2, and then
Yeah,
one
yeah.
from 2 or 2 from 2, then 1 from the third one, and then we have 2 panels
From Imposter
from
Syndrome issue
Imposter
1.
Syndrome issue 1, and which is actually the comic that relates most directly to this one.
Yeah.
But so I don't know why. I don't know why there's so much. I guess because it's the main series, but like very little of Trial by Fire actually relates to here,
Yeah.
in that none does.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the last page of Trial by Fire, which is of course the setup to this story because it's still the main series.
Yeah.
It's not a very cohesive story so far. If you haven't just been reading the comics, it won't make sense to you.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have been reading the comics, you don't need it.
Yep.
Last time on Dragon Ball Z, I hope you watched all of the episodes.
And then we have a cast page, which, uncharacteristically for cast pages in this series, doesn't look like ass.
Yes, and also, what is the cast page? So, typically, you will see the images, names, and a tiny little, generally, like, I think meant to be funny or cute descriptor of various characters who are going to be important in the issue you're about to read, in case you don't know who the characters are, and need just a very quick, very bad primer.
Yeah. You know, for all the characters that are going to be important in this issue, or the characters that are going to be in the previews, and then it's a big reveal when Ruff and Tumble are here, like we knew they were going to be.
Well, there is an actual big reveal in this comic, so.
Yeah.
So yeah, for so as Felicia was saying, this one's uncharacteristically good looking, and looking is the key point there, because cast pages in this series, what they do is they will take art for a character from an interior shot of the book, naturally,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they will often keep using whatever picture they picked for a while, and it's, for whatever reason, very rare for them to update whatever picture they're using on the cast. I don't know why.
Yeah.
But, like, for example, in Trial by Fire, Amy Rose was a significant character, so they kept using... I don't know if even which issue it came from, but it was a picture that had particularly pale and washed-out looking colors.
Yeah.
And it always stood out to me, especially among all the other pictures, as they all tended to be much more vibrant colored. And then, of course, the comic is usually more vibrant than whatever that particular issue was where Amy looked all washed out.
Yeah.
And in general, I feel like they don't pick good pictures most of the time. They, like, the picture they have for Belle, another character in the comic, is not very flattering. There were much better close-ups of her face to pick, I felt.
Yeah.
And the one they did go with just, I didn't think looked very good.
I don't think so either, yeah.
The picture they keep using for Tails,
isn't...
I shouldn't need to tell you who Tails is. He's Tails.
Yeah, yeah.
It's just kind of like off-model, which is a weird one to pick for your cast page. You'd probably want one that is on, like, it's fine to have some off-model artwork, but, like,
for the cast
that's not what
page.
you want for, like, your best foot forward on the character. It's just like the various dimensions of his head just look slightly off, and it's just like, it bugs me.
Yeah.
But this one actually uses all art from this issue. Which you'd think maybe they'd do more often. I don't know why they don't.
Yeah, I don't know.
Because, I mean, one of my big problems is that cast pages often don't look artistically cohesive, because a lot of different people will draw this book. There are many different artists who do the interiors, and they all have, like, their own different, style to them.
Yeah.
And it's just a huge art class for most of the time when you get to these cast pages.
Yeah. So I appreciate that this one was not a disaster.
Yeah. We, of course, because this is a story focusing on Team Chaotix, the Chaotix Detective Agency. So we have Vector the Crocodile,
Rocking Detective, Chaotix Leader,
Espio the Chameleon,
Ninja Spy Detective, Chaotix Member,
Charmy Bee,
Energetic Detective, Chaotix Member,
and then two other characters who previously appeared in the 2020 annual, and were instantly favorites of mine.
And certainly of mine.
We have Night the Owl,
helpful radio host on KTBR 199.2 nightly.
I believe you mean KTBR 199.2 nightly, because he's a radio host.
Right, yeah.
And then Don the Rooster,
night shift custodian at KTBR 109.2 nightly.
Yeah, so they are a fun pair that had a lot of really fun banter in... it was an Evan Stanley story. These are Evan Stanley's characters he made.
Yeah.
And they have not been back in the main series. Well, they have not been in the main series at all. Only appearing in that one annual story until now. And so I was very excited when I saw when the preview pages came out and it was revealed that Night and Dawn were coming back.
Yeah,
because they're just a lot of fun.
Yeah,
they're definitely like pretty background characters, but like, just like sometimes you just see a character and it's like you immediately are just like, yes, I like them.
Yeah, and it's good to see them
just a little bit more.
Yeah.
And I hope they return in the future.
I hope so too.
Because they're fun.
And when you open the comic, you get treated to just the nice, fun knowledge that Night and Dawn have been babysitting Charmy.
Yeah, Charmy Bee, of course, is 6 years old.
Yes.
And very much a child.
Ryan Rudnick in chat, yeah, it definitely, oh boy. Pardon me.
It's a dog. We're not talking about dogs.
We're not talking about
Owls and
dogs.
roosters.
Yeah, we're talking about roosters, but it is cool how cohesive the story is, and how it manages to just have all these varying factors without kind of falling apart, which is something you can't really rely on sometimes.
Mm-hmm. I've read some bad comics.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you're saying.
Um, I was saying. Yes,
Yeah, but
me.
the
Night and Dawn
yeah,
are babysitting Charmy B, who is 6 and a child,
yeah, and
and
it just
so
makes
fun in
them
this issue.
yeah.
Evan
It
Stanley writes Charmy excellently. I'm so happy with all the work he did on Charmy here.
it was so good and cute and fun. I never once felt like, oh, Evan sure hates kids.
Yeah, sometimes when people are writing Charmy, it just feels like they hate him. Like
Which
Charmy is a
definitely,
really fun character to me. He's a hyperactive little child,
yeah,
and he has a really he's just so fun here. He can be so fun if you just let him.
yeah, and it definitely feels like the reflexive, just hatred of Charmy is like a relic of the 2000s, and how like there was this backlash to Sonic having more friends.
Yeah, Charmy, I think, was definitely probably the biggest target
Hmm.
for like saying that Sonic's friends are annoying,
Yeah.
because he had the crime of being a child.
Yes. Of which he is tremendously guilty. And and to go with his just rambunctious childishness, we learn in this issue of IDW Sonic that Charmy's banned from the library for
For life.
life.
Uh,
And you can just
which
imagine just the fun stuff that preceded that ban.
the dialogue from SEO that informs us that he's banned for life is a little ambiguous because it's the English language.
Mm-hmm.
The English language hates being precise.
Yeah.
But I think that the fact that he is banned for life is a secret to Charmy that they've been keeping from him because he'd be heartbroken if he learned that he was banned for life.
Yep. So they're
Which
just
is, and losing you can only keep up so long, but they're going to keep it up.
yep. Mm-hmm.
Maybe eventually, when he has a birthday and he turns 6, then he'll be ready emotionally
Yeah.
to learn that he's been banned for life from the library. But,
And that Santa Hog isn't real.
Santa Hog?
Santa Hog, Santa Hog. You know the song.
I, I don't know.
Santa all the way. Oh, what Santa is a hedgehog. And in this issue,
Oh,
Night.
Hedgehog. Okay. I thought this was like a Hogfather thing, maybe.
No,
No.
no.
That's a different book. Doesn't even have any pictures in it, that book.
Night the Owl gives a quest to to Vector.
Yeah, so basically the gist of what Night the Owl's job is that he's a late night, overnight radio DJ and self-help line.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, people call in with their problems. He tries to give them advice.
Yeah.
Um, uh, actually the story that he debuted in was during a zombie apocalypse.
Yep.
Not a great arc in my opinion, but it was a very fun story where he actually was doing his best as zombies encroached in on the radio station to
Yeah.
guide and direct people to safety
Yeah.
as best he could, with the implication being that these zombies eventually overran the station. And if you're wondering, none of the people who got zombified died. They all got the zombie juice vacuumed off of them. It wasn't a good arc.
It wasn't, but it was a very beautiful story that I think not only was great to read and fun and made me feel good about life, but it also served to highlight how you can tell these kinds of stories well.
Evan's writing really continues to impress. In my opinion, Evan is just the best writer on the book.
And
There
is
are
the
two
reason to
writers.
read it.
There are two regular writers in the book, so there's.
Yeah.
And yeah, Evan Stanley is the reason to read. If you just want to read the best of this, get the Tangled Whisper miniseries, and every book that has Evan Stanley with a writing credit.
Yes. Also, thank you to Ryan for coming back in chat and saying it. Santa Hog is just Sonic in a hat. He volunteers at the mall.
Lovely.
Yeah.
But basically, Night the Owl that calls in from Central City, home of the Flash, as you will all know.
Yeah.
Any comic fans tuning in know about Central City.
Of course.
It's name the same location.
It's funny. It's fun. It's a funny joke that Cluster does.
Yeah. And so they set off into a traffic jam.
Yeah.
Not sew up because they're in a traffic jam.
Yeah. It was my sincerest apologies. I'm a bit lost. We're talking about what the Kiox did in Zeddy Hunt?
No.
Ah.
No, we're talking about right now. In this issue 48, when they're in a traffic jam. They were also in a traffic jam in a recent story.
Right. They were in a traffic jam like throughout the entirety of Zeddy Hunt except for the end.
Yeah, and that gets referenced here by Vector,
Yeah.
who refuses to miss out on another case because of traffic.
Yeah. And then has Charmy fly them away at the promise of ice cream.
He wants sprinkles. Also, Charmy is in a booster seat, which is yellow and black striped like a bee, and it is so cute.
It is so darn cute, and it just makes me so happy. I'm sure.
Every time Charmy is cute in this issue, I love it.
I'm sure if I went back and read the issues where the Chaotix are in traffic during Zeddy Hunt, I would not see a booster seat. But yeah, they make it to the scene, and it turns out everybody is angry in the city.
There was a big old thing that happened, and all the traffic lights went all haywire, and then people crashed into each other, and now everybody's upset. Somebody's nan is waiting across town. There's a reference to Waldo and where he is.
There's like a rabbit dog gal who's on her phone, looking not very pleased.
Yeah, very, very angsty teen.
Yeah, if you ask her.
There's some very fun-looking background characters, as well as just some references in the background.
Yeah. If you ask that teen, if she had a ride home, she'd be like, I don't know. Why would you ask me that now?
But I do bring up the artistic references. And there's various characters you might recognize from pop culture, like Reagan from Mob Psycho 100. I believe the child is called Detective Conan. I haven't watched the anime.
Yeah.
And like I mentioned, there's what appears to be Waldo.
Mm-hmm. Or Wally if you're from the UK.
Oh, if you're from the UK, might be Wally.
Yeah,
and then there's page 5 of the comic.
Yeah, and that's something we're gonna want to weigh in on because as we read the preview pages, which this preview page 5 was released ahead of the comics release.
Yeah, just a couple days.
And we were feeling really good about the comic and really excited and having a good time.
We'd seen the first. Was it 2?
First 2, yeah. With those are the 2 pages that had Night and Dawn on them.
Yeah.
And then to kind of like, okay, new previews, let's go. And then it's
it ends on this, which page 5 is the only page I have criticisms about because I otherwise really love this issue.
No other notes besides this, I think.
Yeah, so among all of the various passersby, a scraggly old man. Uh, Hang on.
Yeah. A scraggly old man is in the crowd, and he declares that he knows who caused the situation with the electrical surge. Um, and it's it's a bit jarring um, how that appears, and we're gonna go over that as soon as Cluster returns. Don't want to go over this too much, but yeah, he's a purple, scraggly old man with a cane, and yeah, mm-hmm. It definitely was a scene that came up in the letter I wrote to the IDW fan letter address, which they leave at the end of every issue. So if you wanna share your thoughts about the
Sorry
comic.
about that. Someone in the house needed me for a second.
Okay, I
I didn't hear
explained.
what you were talking about because I needed to talk to someone.
Yeah. I explained I took off from where you were and explained like the description of this character. That they were a scraggly old man, purple, and they made a bit of a jarring scene. Because I didn't get to this part, but it's very much of the crazy old man archetype.
Yeah, which so it's not fun for me when I see just a depiction of you know mental illness or something masquerading as such when
Yeah.
a writer decides to do something like this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's it's really unfortunately common and really gross and stigmatizing to actual real life people with actual mental illnesses.
Yeah. And especially with the writer who was Evan Stanley. Seeing this from her was very shocking for us.
Evan Stanley is, to be clear, a very generally conscientious writer, and when she's also off the book, like online, talking about things, very just she tends to talk in a very conscientious way and is very like considerate of a lot of things, and
Yeah.
so it's something that would not have really taken me aback as much if it was a different writer.
Yeah.
Um, but Evan is usually better than this, quite frankly.
Yeah, and for the record, we did end up contacting her, and she gave an explanation that honestly made us feel confident that we
Yeah.
uh, we can move forward with
Um,
this.
we had actually each reached out to her on her Tumblr, and she ended up privately answering. And because it was private, I don't want to say what she said in particular, but she definitely assuaged my concerns about like just seeing this in general. And I feel like it is unlikely we will see another scene like this from Evan. Just I
Yeah.
it's
Only time will tell ultimately, but
yeah.
yeah, something
I
I
am I
wanna.
am
Yeah, I'm also hopeful and confident in just Evan's conscience on some level. Um,
yeah.
what
Evan has impressed me a lot of times. So yeah.
Yeah, what what sticks with me is just that I feel like a writer should have caught this. Like, no, not a writer, an editor. An editor, I feel like, could have caught this and kickstarted that conversation without, being like a fan reading this comic that's been published now, and then
Hmm.
having to reach out and then get that closure. I just I'm just gonna say I'm a bit disappointed in the editorial side of the comic for just for this making it this far and then and
There
then
were
yeah.
there are two editors on this comic, David Marriott and Riley Farmer, and it would have been very helpful if either of them had, I don't know, decided to bring up the stigmatizing nature of this or anything. It's
Yeah, but
like, in the grand scheme of things, it is a gag that lasts for one page, but it trades on a long history of just gross sanism in society, and it's ultimately
yeah.
very bad. And
And something that saddens me is that I feel like I feel like Evan is a good writer who thinks these things through, and I feel like she won't. I feel like I don't have to expect this kind of jarringness from her anywhere in the near future, if not ever again. But just the culture around this comic just kind of let it happen and will continue to let things like this happen.
yeah,
And I don't like that.
it's not very good.
But but yeah, eventually the Chaotix move on into the sewer, um where uh where eventually
Well,
the Chaotic.
it happens in the course of one page.
Yeah,
So
yeah. Hmm.
not so, one page after the famous caricature old man, they enter the sewers, and they see a very definitely mysterious and very definitely not a character on the cover of the book that we know who it is.
Yep. And Charmy alerts
Um,
them to Ruff's presence.
yeah, so yeah, there's the duo of characters, basically comic relief bad guys.
Yeah.
The skunks Ruff and Tumble.
Hmm. Which we definitely have some. I'd say we have some thoughts about just the implementation of these characters in the comic thus far.
Yeah,
I think it'd be
and
good to go over that here, if you wouldn't mind.
yeah, so we see Ruff here immediately, and anyone who is aware of how duos tend to work is certain that Tumble is sort of come, and he is later.
Yeah.
Um, the two of them were, was it issue 4
I think it
or
might have
issue
been issue 3.
3?
I think it was issue 3 because that was like Knuckles and all that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was issue 3.
So they appeared in the issue that debuted Knuckles, in which Sonic and Knuckles end up rescuing a town that has been sort of taken over by these two rather
Bullies.
nasty ne'er-do-wells.
Yeah. And
Basically, they promised the town they'd protect them during
mhm.
the events of Sonic Forces, basically.
Yeah.
and then just hoarded all the weapons and captured all of the wisps that were powering the Wispens and subjugated the town and made them feed them grapes or whatever.
Stuff you do when you subjugate. Yeah.
General
And
generic villainy for C grade villains, let's be honest.
yeah, and they haven't really gotten up to much since.
Yeah, so the basic course of them, I can actually go over rather quickly, is they get stopped in that comic by Sonic and Knuckles and are taken off to jail, I guess.
Mm.
They are broken out by B grade villain Dr. Starline,
Mm-hmm.
who is just one rung up above them on the ladder of villainy,
Yeah.
and made to. There's a whole thing with Eggman where he loses memory and then he gets tortured.
Yep.
Long story short, they end up working for Eggman. They fight Sonic for a bit, and then they become patient zeros, both of them, for the zombie apocalypse, and thus disappear from the comic for the entire duration of the zombie apocalypse story.
Yep.
I guess they also did appear in the 2019 annual trying to rob Arsenal Pyramid.
Easily one of the best appearances they'd had up until now.
Yeah. The thing is, so Rough and Tumble have a main gimmick to them, which is, obvious comparison to Team Rocket. They do a little rhyming motto
Yes.
where
they tell you to prepare for trouble.
And or make it double. I forget exactly how it goes, but then they always end it with them both saying together, rough and tumble, and it's...
Yeah.
It's something
cute.
I would find very cute if the comic... Well, if writer Ian Flynn didn't consistently mock it. And I mean, like, from the very first time it happens, Sonic and Knuckles laugh at them. And, like, I think every time they do it, it's mocked or derided or something, and it's like...
I believe, to be precise, Sonic laughs and Knuckles is like, I'm oblivious to how comical this is.
Strange.
Which is delving into just how Knuckles has been written in this comic, which is to say, not very dignified.
Yeah, I've not been a fan at all.
We'll see how that goes later.
Yeah, he is supposed to be coming back after a long absence soon, so...
Yep, just in time for the movie.
He's relevant and marketable, like he's always been.
Yep.
But yeah, basically, Rough and Tumble are, at least, if you look at them, you can see them as like, okay, these are comic relief villains, they're gonna come around, get beaten fairly easily, not really much of a threat, but like, you need some cannon fodder for the heroes every now and then.
Yeah, and they've just been without purpose for so many comics, but
So, because that's the thing is that, well, what I want to say is that, like, it's clearly what they are.
yeah.
But then, like, for the whole zombie apocalypse time, they were out of the picture, and then when they came back, they immediately were in jail again, and...
Prison.
Along with a bunch of other... Well, right, prison. Because there's a whole prison story where they eventually break out.
Prison.
Well, they get broken out, and...
Mm-hmm.
Basically, there's been no status quo for these two up until now, because they were working for Starline, which then, when Starline became working for Eggman, they were working for Eggman,
And
then they became zombies, and then Starline broke them out of prison, and then they were working for Starline.
Yeah.
And then that failed, that whole plan just, like, went up in a bomb, and so they left to vaguely work for themselves, and we didn't see them again until now.
And I will say, I did not expect where we would find them in, with the position, the position they are in now.
So, we mentioned earlier, this does tie into the currently ongoing miniseries Imposter Syndrome, and that left a very unsubtle hint that Rough and Tumble would be appearing in this comic.
Yeah.
Um,
That comic said that they would be arrested.
Yeah, there was a newspaper headline that said career criminals arrested, but it doesn't happen.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that was about.
I don't know. But we find them in an abandoned place.
Yeah. Do we want to get right to that?
Honestly, yeah, there's some cool stuff of like vector deducing based on some broken piece of wood, like where they may be going, and
Yeah, because Ruff is carrying a crate, and when he drops it, it breaks, and Vector finds that it has a label for the Central Sipping Yard.
and it's a good harkening back to just how Vector's character is. He's a bit of a goofball. He seems like he's not knowing what he's doing until he does. Until it turns out actually he's a great detective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But they arrive at a warehouse guided by the smell of the skunk.
Yes.
Because he's a skunk.
Rough and Tumble skunks.
Ruff had previously gotten away by being stinky in the sewer.
Yeah.
Because he's a skunk.
Skunk.
And they... SBO goes into this abandoned-looking warehouse and discovers that Ruff is reporting in to his new boss.
By the name of Clutch the Opossum.
Klutz is a character who, as I mentioned, first appeared in Sour Ace and Badnik Bases as sort of the fake-out villain of that book. And here he is properly an antagonist, though not actually...
the antagonist
I should state that the Chaotix are here in Central City because there was a massive, weird power outage surge thing that messed up the traffic lights, and they're trying to track down who did it as they go down the sewers, and they find that the power lines have actually all been slashed.
Yeah. Yeah. And they get off that trail and onto Rough and Tumbles.
When they find someone skulking around in the sewer where sabotage happened, so they naturally assume that's what they should follow. It's a natural intuition, even if it's wrong.
Yeah, and I appreciated that, like, on some level, like, you can get how they kind of fell away from the case.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of just having them be just oblivious, incompetent, and bad at their jobs.
Yeah, which would be an easy way to write this kind of thing, but it wouldn't be very fun.
And I appreciate Evan for not taking the easy way out here.
Mm-hmm.
But Clutch here, he's a bit of a creep, and shortly SBO, who went in invisibly.
Do we want to mention more about Klutz's character, or?
Go ahead.
Well, because previously when we'd seen him, he was apparently rather famous in certain circles, as Ruse the Bat was aware of him.
Yeah.
And knew that he had a large collection of technology. Most particularly, of course, discarded technology of Eggman's, which is kind of advanced stuff.
Yeah.
And he makes a lot of it, and a lot of it gets broken and left on roadsides, so you can imagine how it can end up a lot of places. He is also a chow racer, because chow racing was a big part of chow races and Badnik Bases.
If you can imagine it.
And he's also an animal abuser, or a chow abuser at any rate, as he kept them locked up in a cramped cage, would refuse to feed them if they didn't win, basically was a horrible, terrible person.
Yeah.
is a villain that you're really glad when he gets kicked in the face.
He's someone you never want to marry, as Sonic would say in Sonic's IDM, the first episode.
Mm-hmm. And so he's a pretty nasty guy, and I think he has sort of a general facade of being like a criminal. Like a lot of like when you think of a Sonic villain, you think of like Dr. Eggman, and he's like a big guy with a robot army.
Yeah.
And Sonic will fight like various monsters Eggman tries to turn into world-destroying threats, and like it's usually very like high-end, more Superman-y supervillains,
as opposed to a Korea criminal.
Yeah. So he's dressed up in a white pinstripe suit, the top anyway, because no pants. He's got very nice shoes. He has a particularly designed ornate cane that is also a gun.
Yeah.
Because he's very much a gangster. And
yeah.
He's very not what you usually get from Sonic. I mean, in Sonic comics, you would usually get this, and by that I mean, I think
in the
every
90s?
English Sonic comic has had at least one mobster villain.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when you're making villains, it's a box tick, at least.
Yeah.
And he's not like a stereotypical mobster too much, but he's very much a businessman. He's all about the money. And as we learn in this issue, maybe more than a little bit about the glory.
Yeah. And, yeah, we get to see his cane gun in action.
Yeah, while SBO is listening in, the railing that he's on ends up creaking, and very quick on the draw. Klutz is immediately blasting. Some dust falls onto SBO, revealing him because he's invisible with his ninja techniques.
As one
chameleon
does.
Techniques.
Ninja chameleon techniques.
He is both a ninja and a chameleon, and I'm never quite sure whether it's supposed to be flavored as chameleon or ninja, but
and it's a shame because now he'll have to restart his training from the very beginning.
Terrible.
Yeah.
But SBO calls for aid by whistling. Vector uses his fun power to yell really loud.
Yeah.
Huff and puff and blow the door in.
And it just really brings to mind Sonic Heroes, which was their first and last major appearance in the
modern games.
In the modern games, though I might count Sonic Forces as they were part of the Resistance.
Yeah, but like they were as major as like anyone else, and there were a lot of different characters, so it was very much an ensemble situation aside from like Sonic and you. Yeah.
In Heroes they were playable. It was their debut in that world, and and then we get to see Rough and Tumble's gimmick play out again after Vector busts in the door. Tumble says, "You tracked us down," and Ruff says, "Might think we're humbled." And then they both say, "But you never tangled with Rough and Tumble."
And then a beautiful thing happens, because number one, they don't get mocked for the rhyming. And it's not presented like a silly thing.
Yeah.
Instead, Vector joins in.
He does. So that's how you play it. Okay, then I'll say it. And it just goes on like that, and he just raps, and it's really cool, and it like just kind of harkens.
He starts rapping. He tail whips Ruff, and he's about to take on Tumble.
But then he starts to stumble because
he's rapping about himself and SBO, and then he starts to rap about Sarmy.
Yeah, Stinger's coming on the next pass. Beehive's ready. gun kick, and then he would have said ass, you see,
Yeah, he
before.
clearly he turns to look at 6-year-old Charmy Bee with a sweat bead on his face. With Charmy being, "That's me. I'm the bee, right?" As Charmy does not know that his dad is about to swear in front of him.
And thank goodness Vector stops himself.
Yeah, and
Oh,
because he's stopping himself from swearing, Tumble actually gets the first hit on, and it's very fun.
it's just a really good scene. It might be my favorite part of the whole comic. Honestly, probably
I
is.
I was quite grinning throughout.
So good at this comic to provide us with the new Chaotix theme, or
Mm-hmm,
a new
mm-hmm.
verse for it. Ah. And of course, then Clutch is trying to make his sweet escape until Espio reveals that he's still here,
Mm-hmm.
and
He
he's
ends up taking Klutz at knife point, or kunai point at any rate.
yeah, and then um, Tumble criticizes. First he claims that only they get to rhyme.
Yeah, I mean, it is a little bit of gimmick infringement.
Yeah, and then comments that Vector's meter's trash.
Which I think might be just sour grapes.
Yeah, yeah. And we can see here Charmy stinging the fuck out of Ruff.
Yeah, eyes popping out very cartoonishly, hair standing on end, because he just got a bee stinger, a very large bee stinger in his back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's funny, so it's okay.
Hmm. They're made of cartoons, don't worry.
Yeah, don't worry. But then we have Clutch calling off his boys, and Espio explaining that this isn't the guy they were looking for. Vector interjects that they're definitely not innocent, and then inquires as to who Clutch is, and that's when something very interesting happens.
So Klutz, like any good villain, and I think he's a good villain,
Mm-hmm.
does he starts to monologue.
Yeah, a good old fashioned villain monologue,
Mm-hmm.
which is very fitting for this old fashioned villain.
Because, yeah, we learn here, because it wasn't really clear what Klutz had been up to before he was a creepy old man who abused Cao
Yeah.
in the VIP suite of a Saleh.
Mm.
Because he says here that once upon a time his reputation would have preceded him, and that he was perfectly content to enjoy his retirement in White Park until a lot of events happened.
Namely, some do-gooders trashed his home, and now he sees that it was a blessing in disguise, a wake-up call, even.
There's a whole new generation of heroes out there. And in his words, heroes I've never tricked, swindled, or beaten. And as long as I'm alive, that simply won't stand.
And he
And
says,
I like this like turn for him.
yeah, honestly, the interesting thing that happens here is Clutch is interesting.
Yeah, I thought he was fine enough for his purpose. He was very
Yeah,
much the fake-out villain in his debut,
yeah,
and the real conflict kind of moved on without him.
yeah.
He was more of a stumbling block. But here he is setting himself up to really be something and be someone.
He was a villain back in the day, back before
Yeah,
the day of
of
certainly,
Sonic.
yeah, Sonic.
I have to assume he was probably working Central City back in the 60s, tangoing with the Flash.
You'll get to that
Um,
issue sometime when you're reading
I,
through them.
I'm reading through the Flash, Silver Age, so I'm sure I'll find him somewhere. It's so funny.
You're hilarious.
Um,
But yeah,
and yeah, he definitely implies that he will be dealing weapons to people. So arms dealer over here.
yep. And
Uh,
It's all very
Vector,
interesting.
yeah. Vector though seems to take affront to this arms dealer plan.
And
Uh,
proceeds to fuck his place up.
he slams his fists down onto the seemingly rather brittle, I mean, it looks pretty abandoned,
Yeah.
floorboards, and all the merchandise goes tumbling into the water.
Which will probably delay his operations by like a month.
I mean, there's no way he's getting that stuff out of the water without some hardware, and I assume the authorities will probably be, dredging that stuff up themselves.
Yeah.
So he'll have to find a new supply for discarded robot parts. I guess
Fucker.
follow Sonic. I don't know.
Yeah. And then it's pretty clear that the Chaotix are not gonna just leave him. Since he's not the man they're looking for.
Yeah, SBO states that they're not going to let him go, but
There's just one thing.
Klutz flips out of nowhere, because he's apparently magician as well, 2 smoke bombs he stole from SBO.
And again, Espe's gonna have to start his training all over again from the beginning. A second time in one issue.
It's terrible. He'll have to train all of his life twice over.
And then Clutch does a smoke bomb and pulls Ruff by the hair and yanks Tumble like in fucking vaudeville.
He's got his cane and he whips the loot. He swips the hand. He swips. Don't know what I'm trying to say. He puts the handle around his throat and pulls him. Which, now that I think about it, that's kind of dangerous. There's a trigger for your gun.
Yeah, don't.
There.
Yeah, that's a little.
And it's pointing at you. That's just dangerous. I mean, maybe you already used up all your bullets. I don't know, but
Maybe.
be more careful, sir.
Sir, please, you have so many years ahead of you.
I mean, not that many.
Not many, but you're gonna make these count. It's a you got a wake up call, man.
But yeah, and the issue ends with Klutz the opossum getting away, telling the Chaotix to spread the word that he's back because, villain needs people to know that they're there.
And it's going to be interesting seeing how that pans out. I wonder if maybe Ekman's going to be like, oh, that guy? What?
I mean, Eggman might be old enough to have heard of him.
I think certainly. Maybe he just wasn't, in that scene to be able to know.
I mean, he was probably pretty young at the time.
Yeah, I bet if Uncle Chuck was here, he'd know. He'd know about Clutch.
Hmm.
Oh, man. But the trail went cold, and they'll have to wait and see what happens next, which the book says next time, calling all badniks. And as you turn the page, you see the next issue's cover with the subtitles reading, Ryan mentioning in chat, I wonder if Gerald and Maria heard, mention of him. Which would then lead to maybe Shadow, hearing stories about him. Maybe. Or, no, there's also amnesia to consider.
Yeah.
Maybe he doesn't.
I don't think Gerald would have concerned himself too much, on the arc.
Yeah.
Gerald might have known about him, but I doubt Gerald would have talked about him. They were kind of in space.
And Shadow already met Clutch, so,
Yeah.
Anyway.
And looked him in the face.
The book says issue 49 is coming next month.
Which is not...
It's not true?
True.
It's not true.
So currently the book is actually on a staggered release with the main series being published one month, and then the next month being an issue of Imposter Syndrome. So the next month is actually Imposter Syndrome issue 3.
Yeah.
And the month after that is issue 49. Month after that is Imposter Syndrome 4. And then after that should be, I believe, issue 50.
Shadow did kick him good, Ryan. Thank you. But yeah, I'm just gonna say, because On each issue of Imposter Syndrome on the cover A, it has issue 50 is coming as a watermark on the bottom left.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very clearly being said, in the solicits as they talk about a road to issue 50. It's being implied that one has to be reading this miniseries in order to keep up. And I was in a room full of Sonic fans, and I asked them, "Do I need to read Imposter? Do I need to read Imposter Syndrome?" And they said, "Yeah." So, with all that in mind, can we just be honest? Can we be honest for a second and just have the next month issue be Imposter Syndrome issue 3, and then Imposter Syndrome issue 3 could be like next month
I mean,
Sonic 49.
you know what comics used to have,
Yeah.
and I think even still do in some comics. But I remember Sonic comics used to have this, which would be a little editor's note, usually in a little yellow box back in the day. It'd come up in the corner, in the bottom right corner, because that's when the comic ends.
Yeah.
And in the bottom right corner of the editor's note, it would say, and next time tune in to this different comic if you want to see the story keep going. Like if there was like maybe an issue of Knuckles the Echidna, but then at the end they're like, oh, and you gotta come to Sonic issue number
56.
94, 56, to finish the story. And then you'd go and read Sonic number 56, and then you'd finish the story. But here, I don't know why the comic doesn't make it more explicit how you're meant to read it. Like, I guess there's social media and stuff, and just meaning for that to fill the void, but I don't know, I would much prefer it if the comic itself just, like, was up front and said that we should be reading Imposter Syndrome.
Yeah.
Because
so far it's just been heavily implied. And,
there have been and actually I do actually want to talk about a few things about Imposter Syndrome as it relates to this issue.
Mm-hmm.
Because in all these solicits for starting with Trial by Fire, issue 1, every solicit for the comic has said that the road to issue 50 is here, and that there's a 10 comic long adventure, and like basically the idea is that starting with Trial by Fire, every main series issue, and then with Imposter Syndrome miniseries, all of those issues are all meant to be the on-ramp into the spectacle or whatever that issue 50 is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think it's been doing a good job of that, so it's become more clear to me, like, how Trial by Fire properly fits into the actual pathway to issue 50. And Imposter Syndrome is very obviously leading in from the beginning, very obvious how it's going to lead into issue 50.
Yeah.
But the problem is that, like, Imposter Syndrome has sort of been affecting the main series in that during the events of that comic, the two new characters, Surge and Kit, have been causing problems, which have been dealt with, or at least observed, in the main series. But the ways that these events are being depicted, despite the fact that these are from writers who are talking to each other...
They are on each other's Discords.
Edited by the same two people.
Yeah.
Despite the fact that they have all... And it's, modern day, we have all the communication tools in the world. The events don't line up.
They don't.
To give an example, because there were two main events, which is that a forest fire gets started, and then the attack on Central City that makes the traffic lights go all haywire happens.
Yeah.
In the pages of Imposter Syndrome, we are shown a panel of new characters, Surge and Kit, spreading dry leaves around with the implication that they used them to start the fire.
Yeah.
In the comic itself, in Trial by Fire, in the third issue, we see that the fire was started from a tree getting struck by lightning.
Yeah.
Which is a common way that actual forest fires get started, and as evidenced by the fact that actual forest fires get started this way, they don't need help with, like...
Yeah?
Look, the comic goes out of its way to explain how, because of the events of the zombie apocalypse storyline that happened before, basically the trees were temporarily made of metal. It was a whole thing.
And they weren't getting
And
any watering.
they didn't get proper water.
Mm-hmm.
And so the area is especially dry and is super. It could go up in flame very easily, which is why there were like a very strict fire restrictions because
Yeah.
Amy and some of her friends were on a camping trip, and
Yeah.
so there were strict fire restrictions. You can't. You gotta make sure your fires are out. Da da da. All that.
Mm-hmm.
And so it just feels weird for them to be spreading leaves around, especially when it is so artfully represented how the fire gets started in Trial by Fire with the split tree.
Yeah.
It feels like I'm being insulted, like I don't know how forest fires work when I read Imposter Syndrome.
And in point of fact, I'm just gonna say the story so far page features panels from Imposter Syndrome, which this comic has never told us is the next issue.
Yes, but also, so it features two panels from Imposter Syndrome issue 1. One showing lights being blown out, and one showing cars crashing. And in this issue, we see that when the kayaks are in their sewers, that someone has slashed the wires, the power lines under the city.
Yeah.
Which doesn't happen to my recollection in Imposter Syndrome.
It's I can pull it up here.
Yeah, because I actually do have also Imposter Syndrome available to me. As I recall, the events play out rather differently.
Yeah, she was on the ground level. Surge.
Yeah, so what happens? I'll just skip over to it.
It specifically was a panel not featuring Surge again, just on the streets. Like
Yeah, so in here we have the character Kit saying that he could take his magical water tentacles and mess with the wiring underground to throw the traffic lights and power grid into disarray. We then see Surge being like, yeah, whatever, I'm gonna go fast, and she goes really very fast with her electrical powers and just destroys everything and leaves the city in disarray. With the popping that we see in the story so far page in this issue is from Surge's electrical currents blowing out some streetlights.
Yeah.
And I was under the impression, at least, that Kit never went forward with his plan because Surge just did it with her lightning.
Yeah.
We were certainly never shown Kit doing the thing he wanted to do, which would have actually played in to what they found down there.
Yeah.
But it was at least heavily implied that Kit never did mess with the wiring, and that Surge's electrical impulses were enough to do the job.
Yeah. That was all we were shown.
If I was meant to believe that Kit actually, put his tentacles down and slashed some wires, the comic never went out of its way to do that. So I'm really not sure. Like, I just don't know why the events were being shown don't line up, and why
are a visual storytelling medium. So if you're not showing it to us or telling us it happened until like later in the different title that's written by someone else, like it's just a really weirdly like unharmonious operation here.
Yeah, and like despite the fact that in Imposter Syndrome, Surge is shown to like knock people over with the shockwave for passing and disturb traffic and blow out streetlights, none of that seems to be reflected here.
Yeah.
In fact, it feels as if Surge hadn't done anything and Kit had done everything.
Yeah, because they say there was a big electrical surge. Then the whole city went haywire. Lights flicking on and off, traffic signals changing at random, the works.
So like I guess what we're meant to think is that both of the plans happened, the one that was talked about, but then, you know, I guess not technically sought down, but we were never sown in Axon, and the only one we were sown in Axon, which was Surge's. And just like, if Kit did his plan too, show me even one panel. Show him putting a tentacle down into the sewers. Like,
There was
I
time to do that.
assumed, I assumed that Kit hadn't done anything, and that was supposed to be the point of that scene. That like he was feeling bad because he wasn't needed, or felt like he wasn't needed. But
Yeah,
like,
and all this to say, I don't feel like I'm being rewarded for reading the comic book, for reading the
yeah,
miniseries along with
just
this
like
main series.
whenever the two major times that the main series and the miniseries have interacted, which I'm pretty sure will be the only times they interact, because we're almost issue 50, and then that'll be just issue 50 happening.
Mm.
But both times that they've intersected, it's felt like the writers aren't really talking. Because these events don't work. They don't line up. And, like, when it came to the fire, I just liked one version better, because it really felt like there were two versions of events.
Yeah.
And when it comes to this one, it feels like I've not been told all the information I'm supposed to have yet.
Yeah. It
Because
just
apparently Kit actually did a thing in Imposter Syndrome issue 1. News to me.
Yeah, and just it just feels like we're being pushed and pulled in two different directions, and that's never a good sign when you're already asking people to buy two different comics and try and make sense of them. Like, it's
Yeah, and
happening like
also,
once a month, but like still.
yeah, honestly, the 2 month wait for each comic sucks for me because by the time 2 months have passed, I've forgotten what happened in the last issue, and I have to go back and recheck. Like,
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to reread Imposter Syndrome 1 and 2 just to remember properly where the story is. Like, I can remember the basic gist of it right now, but like, you
Mm-hmm.
know,
Yeah.
it's just taking so long, and like, I'm not. I'm not feeling terribly excited about issue 50 just because the storytelling, like, to be clear, I've been very much enjoying all of Evan Stanley's issues. I've been very
Me
much
too.
enjoying everything he's been writing.
Mm-hmm.
But it also feels like her stories are just kind of getting compromised in order to tie into Imposter Syndrome.
Which, in point of fact, feels like it should be in the main series, except it's like 4 issues, and you wouldn't be able to find room for in a 4 issue miniseries for these stories, I think. So it just kind of works for formatting purposes to have Imposter Syndrome be the miniseries that's actually having to do with issue 50 more like than this.
Yeah, because all we know currently about issue 50, besides what we can glean from the events leading up to it in the comics leading up
Yeah.
to it, is that it's called Battle for the Empire.
And we are leading to an
And
epic showdown between Sonic and Surge.
apparently. And in Imposter Syndrome, it makes it very clear that, like, Starline's trying to fight Eggman.
Mm-hmm.
The empire in question is the Eggman Empire.
Yes.
Which you just assume from Battle for the Empire, because I assume if you're reading the solicits, you're probably a Sonic fan, or at least you know enough about Sonic to know that Eggman often calls his organization the Eggman Empire.
Yeah.
So, and from that, it's very obvious that, like, the most relevant comic is the one that has Starline in it.
Mm-hmm.
Because he wants to fight Eggman.
Yeah.
But that's in the miniseries.
And not the main series. And the main series is being saddled with very fun, far superior, but still filler. I'm just gonna say.
Yeah. I mean, like, the solicit for number 49 came out, and it's clear that like a plot point that came up in Trial by Fire is
Mm-hmm.
going to be relevant there.
Yeah.
And that's going to lead into issue 50, very obviously,
Yes.
because it's issue 49.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but like, you know, this particular story actually. So not that it doesn't have anything to do with imposter syndrome, but like, imposter syndrome affects this story.
Mm-hmm.
This story is almost certainly not going to affect imposter syndrome, issue 50, any of that. This is very much set up as a self-contained story that you don't need to have read imposter syndrome to understand. You should probably have read Sarah's and Batting Bases and at least some appearances of Rough and Tumble,
Yeah.
so that, you know, you'll understand all the players at work.
Yeah.
But it's really mostly unconnected to anything else around it.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a standalone chaotic story, and it's a fun story. You know, the chaotics, I think, are a good, you know, character set to have a standalone story with.
Yeah.
They very much suit that, you know, that
format.
that format.
Mm-hmm.
But like, this is just kind of a speed bump
It is.
in the grand scheme of like, we're supposed to be very excited for issue 50, apparently.
And like, if I was excited, I would feel a little cheated that this comic has very little to do with it. But the thing is, and this is bad news for the comic, I think, is that I really like this issue, in part because it doesn't make me think of issue 50. It doesn't make me think of just how very cynically like marketing ploy it's been, like the whole lead up to it. Doesn't make me think about that. It makes me think about the comic. Makes me think about the characters. It gives me a break from the very cynical, just ramping up of the road to issue 50. And I don't think your comic should be making me think, oh, thank goodness, I'm getting a fucking break from the comic doing the thing that that it is on paper trying to right now get me, excite me for like.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, I'd love to be living in a world where I'm honestly looking forward to issue 50, but it's not the world we're in.
We're not about to get the final battle between Sonic and Dr. Julian Robotnik here in Robotropolis.
Yeah, you know,
it's
if you're not aware from the previous American Sonic comic series, it also had a very big showdown in its 50th issue.
Yeah.
Its 25th issue actually was the debut of Metal Sonic. Coincidentally, 25th issue of this series had a very fun scene that had Metal Sonic in it.
Yeah. Honestly, I would say that scene was better than the entirety of the original issue 25 of Sonic Comics.
It was firmly in the silly early part of the artsy published Sonic comics that people will know about sometimes.
Yeah.
But by the time of issue 50, more serious storytelling had become the norm.
Yeah. The creators had lobbied for, or at least one creator had lobbied for the comic to take a different turn. The editor at the time was.
Yeah, writer Ken Penders very much pushed a more serious storytelling, and so
the editors were receptive. Scott Fulop and Justin Gabri, they were both on board with that, and they made something special.
Yeah, and like, so I guess I don't know. I don't want to talk too much about issue 50 here at issue 48.
We're going to be talking about issue 50 of Archie Sonic and issue 50 of IDW Sonic plenty.
Yeah.
Probably
when issue 49 comes out, because we're probably going to be talking about this again.
Maybe Imposter Syndrome, maybe whenever we cover issue 50 in the space year of 2022 still, but it's June.
Issue 50 is going to come up in probably all of those times that we talk about this comic, because we are planning on covering this comic every month.
Yep. And when we say this comic, we mean this comic series and the mini series that is masquerading as a mini series when it's really just kind of part of the
Yeah.
main series.
I mean, I believe all the miniseries on this book have been titled like Sonic the Hedgehog subtitle, so
Yeah.
it's all this book. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of those issues is arbitrarily numbered number 50.
Yep. And we're getting to it, and I just cannot wait for it to be over with.
After it's over, we can stop talking about it.
And I will love that. But
Yeah.
overall, this comic was a great load of fun. There's a lot
Issue
of
48.
politics surrounding it, but when you get down to it, we're going to be able to come back to this comic and enjoy it without even thinking about issue 50. We're just going to be able to look
Yeah.
at this, look at this fun, chaotic caper, and it's...
And skip page 5.
Skip page 5, and have a good time with our good pals, Vector, SBO, Charmy, Mighty. No, not Mighty. No, he's not. Oh, I got confused.
Also, just as a note, on page like 7,
Yeah.
Vector like throws Charmy at Ruff the
Ruff.
Skunk, and Charmy takes his goggles that are always on top of his helmet and pulls them down over his eyes.
Yeah, he's Goggle Boy.
This probably sounds really weird if you don't know anything about Sonic, but like that's a design element that's on Charmy is his little goggles because he's a flyer. But I cannot remember any time he's ever been depicted actually wearing his goggles, and it's just really cute.
Charmy Goggle Boy real, finally.
Yeah, and it's just like you see a little part of him put them on, and then you see a little panel where he's taking them off. And it's all very organic, but it's like it's just so fun, and then he's so cute with them on.
I love Sonic comics. This is great.
Yeah, and I mentioned it briefly before, and I keep mentioning that Charmy's cute, but like it cannot be said enough how just so good Aaron Hammerstrom's art is.
Yeah.
It is phenomenal.
I really love it the whole way through, except for the page 5, but the rest of the way through.
Yeah. Very large praise to Aaron Hammerstrom and Matt Froese and Reggie Graham on colors, and of course, massive credit to Evan Stanley, because the writing in this issue, the dialogue and the character moments are so good.
I never feel like the art is doing the heavy lifting for the writing when Evan is on. It always feels like it's always a really good balance and a good marriage between the writing and the art when it's Evan, which comes with her being an artist writer.
Yeah, Evan Stanley, of course, is probably my personal favorite artist on the book. Super loving what Aaron Hammerstrom did here.
Yeah.
But I definitely put him on like the same level as Evan.
Yeah.
It just there's some gorgeous art. If like a lot of Evan's books that she's written are also drawn by her, so you can get a lot of her art if you go and look at those. And I do recommend her writing and art. So
yeah. And if you just can't get enough of Evan's writing, after you've caught yourself up on IDW Sonic, you can trek back to the old comic series and spin-off series at that, because she wrote the Silver Age in the Sonic Universe title from a while back, and
yeah,
you can find that if you look hard enough. You can also
cannot
just
buy it.
You cannot buy it. You can
because Archie lost the license. I think we all know where to find comics you can't buy anymore,
and that's okay. And if you wanna go further than that, Evan hosts her fan comic on DeviantArt. There's also like other places that collect it all together, but yeah, like you can find her fan comic Ghosts of the Future.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a real treat. It has a rough beginning, but for the love of Christ. It
was started when Evan was a teen, I believe. So like the art and writing are both.
It has been
the
going
stuff
on.
That a teen makes.
it has been going on for well over a decade. It might end up being one of the longest running Sonic comics ever.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at the rate we're going. Doesn't have a license it can lose, so we'll see.
Mm-hmm. It's all about how long Evan wants to keep doing it.
Yep. But yeah. So you can check that out. Find all about Silver and his fun weird family.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like can't praise Evan enough, and really appreciate her presence on the comic. And I can only hope she gets to have more influence going forward.
Yeah, just Evan. Evan is the reason to read this book. Evan is so good. I just want Evan to do as much on this book as is healthy.
Yeah, that's a good bar there. But
Maybe a little, not quite the maximum of what is healthy. Maybe do 80%.
80% is good.
It's good to give yourself a little cushion. Don't go 100%. Like, give yourself a little cushion.
Yeah. So
if you're constantly reaching your limit, you're gonna burn out. Anyway.
Yeah. I think that wraps it up for today, and I realized that that I said on our social media at BitslyProd on Twitter that that we would be going back with Big Story. This has not been Big Story. It's been the Chaotix story. Thank you very much.
Yeah, Big's not here.
Big is not here, not even in the cameo. But and there is a frog, but it is not Froggy. So we're gonna have to look for another.
He's an angry driver.
Gonna have to look another pond for Froggy, but and unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know. It's a neat coincidence that next Tuesday is tentatively planned to be another edition back to back with of a Bitsley Book Club with Monkey Prince issue 2.
Yeah, another Tuesday the first of a month, another Tuesday, first of the month where Monkey Prince comes out.
And we will be covering that next, as long as everything works out. I had a good time here. I had a good time talking about this comic with y'all.
Yeah. To overall rate this comic, if I were to give it a rating, it would be high.
Yes, I would.
If I were to give it a rating, it would be high. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to, but it would be very high if I were to.
If you think about ratings with numbers, and how it goes up to a certain number, it would be at or near that highest number probably.
Yeah, if I were to give this a rating out of 5, it would be a larger number, closer to 5 than 1.
Yeah, so
more than 3. And if it was a rating out of 10, it would be more than 5.
So in the grand scheme of things,
higher end.
Yeah. I'd say I recommend this comic. It comes with a caveat.
It comes with technically a couple of caveats. Number one is that you really should have read more comic before this. Not the comic titles immediately, before it, but Cyrus and Bat and Bases in particular is the main important one I'd want to read first.
Yeah.
And then issue 5 has a really unfortunate attempt at humor that I don't like, and
page 5, yeah.
What did I say?
You said issue 5. Anyway,
but issue 5 might have a really unfortunate attempt at humor. I don't know.
It probably did, yeah. But
that came out almost 4 years ago or something.
Good God. Thanks for tuning in. And we'll see y'all later. Bye!